Going to the doctor with like this stabbing, relentless pain in your knee.
Oh, that's the worst.
Right. You can barely walk up the stairs. So you sit on the exam table, and after looking at how you walk, the doctor tells you that the only way to fix your knee pain is to aggressively treat your ankle.
Which just sounds completely backward.
Exactly. It sounds like a misdiagnosis. Honestly, it sounds like medical malpractice. But according to the cutting edge of biomechanics, it might actually be the only accurate diagnosis you've ever received.
Because the real reason you're in pain is that your brain is, well, it's actively lying to you about where your body is broken.
It's just wild. Today we are doing a deep dive into this exact phenomenon. We're decoding a phrase that the fitness industry has absolutely beaten to death.
Oh, functional training.
Yes, functional training. Every gym class, every shiny new workout app, they all claim they've cracked the code on functional movement.
But when you actually look at the clinical research we're exploring today, specifically on functionally integrated exercise and muscle balance, it turns out our standard approach is just it's fundamentally flawed.
Yeah, like sitting on a padded machine at the gym and pushing a heavy lever back and forth.
Right. It's flawed because it completely ignores the reality of human evolution. For decades, the fitness industry has sold us this idea of compartmentalization.
We like things to be neat and tidy, you know? I'm in a little list.
Exactly. You want better arms, you do a bicep curl. You want better legs, you sit on the leg extension machine. A very seductive, clean way to look at anatomy.
But I'm assuming the brain doesn't actually have a blueprint for like a bicep or a quadricep.
It really doesn't. The motor cortex of your brain does not think in terms of isolating individual muscles. It's entirely task-oriented.
Meaning it only cares about the end result.
Yeah. It thinks in complex, synchronized movement patterns. A great way to visualize this from the research is looking at a baseball batter stepping up to the plate.
Oh, right. The pitch coming in at 90 miles an hour.
Exactly. The batter is not consciously sending a sequential list of commands down their spinal cord. They aren't thinking, first I need to fire my triceps.
Then I'll engage my anterior deltoids.
And finally I'll contract my obliques to twist. If they did that, they'd strike out every single time.
The ball would be in the catcher's mitt before they even finished flexing their shoulder.
Right, because conscious isolation is just too slow. It's clunky. Instead, the batter just thinks about the end goal, hit the ball.
And the brain just takes care of the rest.
Instantly. To achieve that single action, the brain initiates a synchronized wave of electrical impulses. We're talking dozens of joints and hundreds of muscles firing in a precise fraction of a second.
So the system is designed to execute integrated movements, not flex isolated muscles.
Precisely. So when we sit down on a standard gym machine that locks us into a single, rigid path of motion,
we're basically speaking a language the brain doesn't actually use in the real world.
That's a great way to put it.
It's like trying to learn Spanish by only reading a dictionary. Sure, you get the individual vocabulary words, like the individual muscles, but you completely lack the flow, the grammar, and the context to actually have a conversation.
That is a critical distinction for you to understand if you want to fix your pain. Traditional resistance machines actually prevent the body from moving functionally.
Because they lock you into one plane of motion.
Right. In biomechanics, we divide movement into 3 planes, and most machines operate purely in the sagittal plane.
Which is just moving forward and backward, right?
Exactly.
Okay, let's map these planes out so we can visualize what we're actually missing. So sagittal is forward and backward, like walking down a hallway or doing a standard bicep curl. What are the other 2?
Well, the frontal plane is side-to-side movement. Think of a basketball player laterally shuffling across the court to block a pass.
Or doing a side lunge.
Yeah. And then you have the transverse plane, which is rotational. That's the golfer swinging a club.
Or twisting your torso to look over your shoulder when you're backing your car out of a driveway.
Exactly. So a truly functional movement, something that actually prepares the human body for the chaos of daily life, has to flow through all 3 of those dimensions simultaneously.
It has to be multiplanar.
Multiplanar, yes. Think about a senior citizen carrying a bag of groceries up a curving set of stairs.
That's a lot going on at once.
It is. They're stepping forward in the sagittal plane, shifting their weight side to side in the frontal plane to keep their balance, and their torso is rotating in the transverse plane to follow the curve of the stairs.
So they're reaching, rotating, stepping, and balancing all at the same time.
Right. And if their only exercise is sitting on a leg extension machine, kicking their shins upward,
They are entirely unprepared for the physics of that staircase.
Completely unprepared.
Yeah.
But it's not just about the direction of the movement either. It's also about gravity.
Right, because if I'm just sitting on a machine, the padded seat is supporting my weight. I'm not actually managing the forces of the real world.
You're touching on the concept of the loading and unloading cycle here. Real dynamic activity requires us to constantly interact with gravity and momentum.
Like when you walk down a steep hill.
Yes. When you walk down a hill, you aren't just producing force to move forward, you're forced to absorb it. You have to slow your body down so you don't fall on your face.
The muscles are acting like brakes.
Exactly. That braking action is an eccentric contraction. The muscle is physically lengthening while it is under tension.
Like pulling back a rubber band.
Right. It's absorbing kinetic energy and storing it. That's the loading phase. And once you stabilize the joint, you transition to the unloading phase.
The concentric contraction.
Yes, where the muscle shortens to produce force in a new direction.
So if I lower myself into a squat, that's the eccentric the braking mechanism. And pushing back up to a standing position is the concentric unload the accelerator.
You got it. And functional training required your nervous system to be highly efficient at transitioning between those two phases.
While simultaneously managing proprioception.
Yes, proprioception is huge here.
That's the body's internal GPS system, right? Your awareness of where every limb is in space without having to look at it.
Precisely. So when you combine multiplane movement, eccentric loading, concentric unloading, and proprioceptive stabilization,
You are finally utilizing the body as an integrated kinetic chain.
you are. That is true functional movement.
Okay, so if my brain is brilliantly firing off a whole body symphony just to swing a baseball bat, and my body is this perfectly designed kinetic chain.
I feel a butt coming.
Oh, a big one. Why did I pull my lower back just leaning over to pick up a dropped pen this morning? Like, where's the disconnect between the brain's evolutionary blueprint and the reality of us walking around feeling stiff, unbalanced, and in pain?
The disconnect happens at the fulcrum. To understand why the whole system breaks down, we have to zoom in on the mechanics of a single joint.
Okay, let's zoom in.
A joint basically acts as a pivot point between two bones. For that joint to have structural balance, for you to have good posture and pain-free movement, there must be an equal amount of tension pulling from the opposing muscles on either side.
So the joint is a seesaw.
Yes, the seesaw.
If I have a 100-pound kid on one end and a 100-pound kid on the other, the seesaw is perfectly horizontal. It's stable.
But what happens if you put a 200-pound adult on one side and a 50-pound child on the other?
Well, the adult crashes to the ground, the kid is stuck in the air, and the structural alignment of the seesaw is completely destroyed.
That is the exact definition of a muscle imbalance. And the thing is, these imbalances aren't random.
They're predictable, right? Because of the genetic lottery we inherited.
Very predictable. Our muscles are not all created equal. The research divides them into two distinct categories that have completely different jobs, different cellular makeups, and entirely different vulnerabilities.
We're talking about postural stabilizers versus phasic mobilizers. This distinction was a massive paradigm shift for me.
It really changes how you look at physical therapy.
It completely changed how I view my own terrible posture. Let's start with the postural stabilizers, because these seem to be the prime culprits in a lot of our pain.
Postural stabilizers have a static function. Their primary job is not to create big sweeping movements.
So what do?
Their job is to stabilize a joint and keep the human skeleton upright against the relentless downward pull of gravity. Biologically, they are composed primarily of slow-twitch muscle fibers.
Meaning they are the marathon runners of the muscular system. They're built for endurance.
Right, they can hold tension all day long without fatiguing. But because their evolutionary job is to constantly resist gravity, they have a very specific pathological tendency.
Which is?
When they are overworked or stressed, they don't get weak. They get tight. They physically shorten.
Give me a visual map of where these are located so we know what we're actually dealing with.
They are generally deeper muscles. Think of the upper trapezius and levator scapulae in your neck.
The ones holding your heavy skull up all day.
Exactly. Also think of the erector spinae, which are the thick cables of a muscle running up either side of your spine. And crucially, the iliopsoas.
Oh, the deep hip flexors. If we could look through the skin, what does the iliopsoas actually look like?
Imagine a thick, powerful rope that originates on your lower lumbar spine, cuts deep through your abdominal cavity, crosses over the front of your pelvis, and attaches to the top of your femur, your thigh bone.
And its job is to lift your knee toward your chest.
Yes, so those are your postural muscles. Deep, endurance-focused cables that are prone to shrinking and tightening.
Okay, so what's on the other side of the seesaw?
The phasic mobilizers. These muscles are responsible for dynamic movement, not static holding. They tend to be more superficial, closer to the skin.
And they often cross multiple joints to create leverage, right?
Exactly. And unlike the postural stabilizers, they are composed mostly of fast-twitch muscle fibers.
So they're built for explosive power and speed, like a sprinter, but they run out of gas very quickly.
That's it. And their vulnerability is the exact opposite of the stabilizers. When phasic mobilizers are stressed or underused, they don't get tight. They become genetically prone to weakness and lengthening.
What muscles are we talking about here?
We are talking about muscles like the rectus abdominis, your visible six-pack abs, your gluteus maximus, and your lower trapezius in your mid-back.
Wait, hold on. You're saying my body is inherently biased.
Inherently biased, yes.
So if I do nothing, my neck and hips will automatically shrink and tighten, while my abs and glutes will automatically stretch out and get weak.
That is the natural tendency, yeah. But here is the critical piece that most physical therapy patients never get told. It's not just a physical problem.
It's not just that one muscle is physically shorter, like a dried-out rubber band.
No, there is a massive neurological communication breakdown occurring simultaneously.
A neural imbalance.
Exactly. When a postural muscle becomes tight and overworked, the nervous system starts to treat it differently. The brain essentially gives that muscle VIP access to electrical signals.
The scientific term in the text was that the muscle becomes neurally facilitated.
Right.
What does that actually mean in practice, though? Like, if a muscle is neurally facilitated, how does it behave when I try to move?
It becomes hyperexcitable. The threshold for it to fire drops dramatically. So whenever you initiate a movement, that tight muscle contracts too early, and it contracts with excessive force.
It jumps the gun.
It absolutely jumps the gun. And because of the laws of neurology, that hyperexcitability forces the muscle on the opposite side of the seesaw, the weak phasic muscle, to become neurally inhibited.
So the tight muscle is shouting so loudly that the weak muscle goes deaf.
That's a fantastic analogy. It literally cannot receive the electrical signal from the brain effectively. It responds late, and with a fraction of the force it should.
It sounds like the postural stabilizers are like the toxic, overachieving micromanagers of the office.
Oh, I like that.
Right. They refuse to delegate, they jump in and take over every single project, and because they won't stop working, the phasic muscles just give up, go to sleep at their desks, and let the micromanagers do all the heavy lifting.
That is exactly what happens. Yeah. And if you look at our modern environment, it is terrifying how perfectly it caters to this dysfunction.
Our lifestyle is basically a masterclass in accelerating the specific imbalance.
It really is. If you're listening to this on a commute right now, or you're sitting at a desk, just think about the angle of your body.
Let's analyze the desk posture. I'm sitting in a chair right now, leaning forward a bit.
Look at your hips.
Yeah.
By sitting, you have folded your hips at a 90-degree angle. That thick rope we talked about, the iliopsoas, is now held in a slack, dramatically shortened position.
And you hold it there for 8 hours a day.
Right. Meanwhile, your gluteus maximus, the opposing phasic muscle on the other side of the seesaw, is literally being stretched and squashed under your body weight. It's completely inactive.
So the desk is physically shrinking the micromanager and suffocating the sleepy worker.
Exactly. Now look at your upper body. You are holding your arms out to type. Your upper trapezius and neck extensors are held in constant static tension to keep your head from falling onto the keyboard.
They are becoming hyper-excitable.
Yes. Meanwhile, the muscles in your mid-back, the ones supposed to pull your shoulder blades together, are stretched across your hunched back and neurally inhibited.
We are spending decades training our nervous systems to lock in these imbalances.
Decades.
Okay, so we have these overactive micromanagers permanently tilting the seesaws and the sleepy muscles on the other side failing to pull back. But life requires movement.
You still have to get up and do things.
Right. I still have to stand up. I still have to walk. I still have to reach for things. If the prime movers, the muscles that are supposed to do the job, are asleep, how does the body actually accomplish the task?
Well, the brain is incredibly resourceful. It will find a way to complete the movement, but it has to cheat to do it. It uses a phenomenon called synergistic dominance.
Synergistic dominance. Break the physics of that down for us. What does it mean to cheat a movement?
Every major movement has a prime mover. the CEO muscle designed to do the heavy lifting, but it also has synergists, which are helper muscles designed to assist, stabilize, and guide the joint.
So they're the middle management.
Exactly. Let's look at hip extension, the act of pushing your leg backward, which is how you propel yourself forward when you walk or run. The prime mover for hip extension should be your gluteus maximus.
Which is the largest, most powerful muscle in the human body.
It is, but we just established that because you sit all day, your glutes are early inhibited, the CEO is asleep at the wheel.
Precisely. So you stand up and try to run, the brain sends the signal, extend the hip, but the glutes don't fire.
And the brain still demands forward propulsion.
So it recruits the synergists, it forces your hamstrings and your lower back muscles, the erector spinae, to take over the primary job of hip extension.
But if they're doing the job, why does the body care? I mean, a muscle lifting a leg is a muscle lifting a leg, right?
Yeah.
If the hamstrings can pull the weight, what's the problem?
The problem is mechanical leverage and structural capacity. It's like using a screwdriver to hammer a nail.
You might eventually get the nail into the wood.
But you are going to absolutely ruin the screwdriver, and you're going to damage the wall around it. The hamstrings and lower back are simply not designed to endure the massive force requirements of a prime mover.
Try this if you're listening right now and you have room to stand up. Stand up, keep your leg perfectly straight, and squeeze your glute to pull your leg backward behind you. You should feel a powerful contraction in your glute.
But if your hip flexors are tight and your glutes are asleep, you might actually feel the muscles in your lower back seizing up just to lift your leg.
That's synergistic dominance happening in real time.
And the consequence of that dominance is disastrous for the joints. Because the wrong muscles are firing, they pull the joint out of its ideal axis of rotation.
The movement becomes jerky and uncoordinated.
Right. The bones literally grind against each other in ways they weren't designed to. This triggers a catastrophic cascade that biomechanists call the joint stress cycle.
The joint stress cycle. This feels like the holy grail for understanding why so many people suffer from chronic pain that never seems to heal.
It really is. Let's walk through the domino effect. Where does this cycle start?
It starts right where we are, with a muscle imbalance.
Yeah.
We have a tight facilitated muscle on one side and a weak inhibited muscle on the other. That imbalance immediately causes a physical loss of flexibility in the tight muscle.
Because that muscle is resting in a state of constant partial contracture, the joint it crosses becomes progressively stiffer.
It's essentially a low-grade muscle spasm that never turns off.
Exactly. So now you have a stiff joint. Because the joint lacks its full natural range of motion, your body mechanics are fundamentally altered. You cannot move efficiently.
You have to expend significantly more energy just to execute basic movements.
Which leads to rapid muscular fatigue and decreased endurance. You're burning premium gas just to idle in traffic.
And as the fatigue sets in, the muscles lose their ability to absorb shock. All of that unabsorbed kinetic energy, combined with the altered mechanics, result in massive abnormal stress being dumped directly into the structural tissues of the joint.
We're talking about the ligaments, the cartilage, the tendons.
Yes, and this manifests as chronic pain, inflammation, and eventually acute injury.
This completely exposes the flaw in how we usually treat pain. If I go to a standard clinic with lower back pain, they might prescribe rest, a heating pad, maybe some ultrasound therapy or muscle relaxants.
And those treatments will almost certainly fail to provide long-term relief.
Because they are exclusively treating the final symptom of the cycle, the localized pain or the spasm.
Right. If you put a heating pad on a spasming lower back, the heat will increase blood flow and the spasm will temporarily relax. You'll feel better for an hour.
But the fire is still burning. I've just temporarily unplugged the smoke alarm.
Precisely. Because as soon as you stand back up, your chronically tight hip flexors immediately pull your pelvis forward again.
Your inhibited glutes fail to stabilize the joint.
And the lower back is forced right back into synergistic dominance and spasms again. Rest and heat do absolutely nothing to address the neurological muscle imbalance that is the root cause.
And because the kinetic chain is completely interconnected, the place where you feel the smoke alarm going off is very rarely the room where the fire actually started.
That is so true. The research on this provided an example that I had to read 3 times because the biomechanics are so wild. It traces a severe knee problem all the way down to a tight calf muscle.
The gastrocnemius example. It perfectly illustrates how an imbalance travels through the chain. Let's trace the physics of it slowly. The gastrocnemius is the large visible muscle on the back of your calf.
It is a classic postural stabilizer, meaning it is highly prone to becoming tight and shortened.
Let's say we have a runner whose calf is chronically tight. What happens at the ankle?
Because the calf muscle attaches to the heel via the Achilles tendon, a tight calf physically restricts the ankle's ability to bend properly. Specifically, the ankle lacks normal dorsiflexion.
Okay, explain dorsiflexion natively. What does that look like?
Dorsiflexion is the physical ability to pull your toes upward toward your shin. When you run, as your foot strikes the ground and your body travels over it, your ankle must dorsiflex to allow the shin bone to glide forward over the foot.
But our runner has a tight calf. The ankle hits a mechanical roadblock. It cannot bend forward enough.
But the runner's mass is still moving forward at 8 miles an hour. The energy has to go somewhere.
Exactly. The human body is a master of compensation. It will always seek the path of least resistance to keep momentum going. If the ankle joint won't bend properly in the sagittal plane forward and backward, the body forces the movement into the frontal and transverse planes.
Lacking forward mobility, the foot overpronates.
Meaning the arch collapses and the foot rolls excessively inward toward the midline of the body. It's literally collapsing the architecture of the foot to cheat the forward movement.
It's a structural collapse, but it doesn't stop at the foot. The foot is attached to the tibia, the lower leg bone. As the foot violently collapses inward during the stance phase of the run, the mechanics force the tibia to twist.
It rotates externally. I can feel that if I do it right now. If I force my right foot to cave inward, flat onto the floor, my shin bone twists to the right, outward.
And what sits directly on top of the tibia?
The knee joint.
The patellofemoral joint. The knee is essentially a hinge. It's designed to flex and extend, not to twist.
But that external rotation of the tibia creates a massive abnormal torsional force, a twisting torque, that travels straight up the bone and shears right into the knee joint with every single stride.
So the runner goes to the physical therapist complaining of excruciating knee pain. They ice the knee, they tape the knee, they get MRIs of the knee cartilage.
But the knee is completely innocent. The knee is just the victim of a tight calf muscle dragging the entire leg out of alignment.
The pain in the knee is merely a symptom of a structural limitation at the ankle. Until you restore the length of the gastrocnemius and give the ankle its dorsiflexion back, no amount of knee therapy will ever cure the runner.
That is just mind-blowing. It means that nagging ache in your shoulder or that sharp pain in your lower back might actually be a hip problem or a foot problem in disguise.
Most likely, yes.
But this raises a massive logistical issue. If we understand that we need to fix these imbalances, we need to lengthen the tight muscles and wake up the weak ones to break the cycle, how do we actually do it? Because we aren't just dealing with muscle tissue, are we?
No, we are fighting against the connective tissue that wraps the entire system.
You're referring to the fascial web. And to understand how to fix structural dysfunction, we have to transition from the biology of muscles into the bizarre physics of viscoelasticity.
Viscoelasticity, let's define this, because when most people think of flexibility, they think of a rubber band. You pull a rubber band, it stretches, you let go, it snaps perfectly back to its original size. That is pure elasticity.
But human tissue is not a rubber band.
Right. Our muscles, tendons, and fascia are viscoelastic. That means they possess both elastic properties, the ability to stretch and return, and viscous properties.
Viscosity refers to a fluid-like resistance to flow, much like thick honey.
Yes, because of this viscous element, our tissues are highly responsive to two variables: time and sustained tension.
The physics of this introduce two concepts that dictate how our bodies deform over time: creep and stress relaxation. Let's start with creep, because it honestly sounds like a horror movie concept. What is creeping inside my muscles?
Creep is the gradual lengthening of a tissue over time when it is subjected to a constant sustained force.
Okay.
If you hang a moderate weight from a viscoelastic tissue, the elastic properties will cause it to stretch a certain amount immediately. But if you leave the weight there for 20 minutes, the viscous properties allow the tissue to slowly, imperceptibly continue elongating.
That slow, continuous deformation under constant load is creep. So if I sit slumped forward with my head hanging down to look at my phone for an hour, the constant downward pull of my heavy skull is causing the tissues in the back of my neck to experience creep. They are slowly stretching out like warm taffy.
That's spot on. And the inverse of that behavior is stress relaxation. If you stretch a tissue to a specific length and just hold it statically at that new length, the amount of internal force or tension required to keep it there will gradually decrease over time.
The tissue yields. It literally relaxes into the new length.
So time under tension physically alters the structural architecture of our bodies. And the ultimate architect of this whole process, the tissue that is actually remodeling itself, is fascia.
Fascia is arguably the most misunderstood organ in the human body. For centuries, traditional anatomy classes practically ignored it.
They really did. Medical students would dissect cadavers, and they would carefully scrape away the fascia and throw it in the trash so they could look at the important red muscles underneath.
They treated it like it was just passive biological saran wrap, just packaging material holding the meat in place.
But we now know that fascia is a continuous, three-dimensional web of connective tissue that envelops every single muscle fiber, every bundle, every bone, and every organ.
Functionally, it is the only tissue in the body that can mediate responsiveness across the entire system. Because it is continuous, tension in one area is instantly transmitted across the skeleton along what we call myofascial meridians.
Lines of pull. The research highlighted the superficial back line, and it is a perfect example of how interconnected we are.
Where does this fascial line start and end?
The superficial back line is a continuous sheet of fascia that begins at the bottom of your feet, the plantar fascia.
Okay.
It wraps under your heel, travels up the back of your calves, seamlessly merges into your hamstrings, continues up your lower back, runs all the way up your spine, goes over the top of your skull, and finally attaches right above your eyebrows on your forehead.
That is one continuous piece of tissue. So a mechanical restriction in the arch of my foot could literally pull on the tissue in my forehead.
Yes. A tight plantar fascia can absolutely contribute to a tension headache. The strain is transmitted along the meridian.
That's crazy.
But the most revolutionary discovery about fascia, the thing that changes everything about how we approach posture, is that fascia is not passive. It is actively alive.
I read this in the notes, and it is simultaneously amazing and terrifying. How can a connective web be active? It doesn't have a brain.
It contains specialized cells called myofibroblasts.
Let's break that word down.
Sure. A fibroblast is a cell that creates structural collagen. A smooth muscle cell is what causes involuntary contractions, like in your digestive tract. A myofibroblast is a hybrid of the two.
Meaning that the fascial web can contract autonomously, independent of your conscious nervous system, in response to sustained mechanical loads.
Yes.
Let me make sure I'm grasping the implications of this. If I sit hunched over my keyboard with my shoulders rounded forward for 8 hours a day, year after year, what are the myofibroblasts doing?
They sense the sustained mechanical load of that bad posture. In response, they activate.
Oh, no.
The fascia stiffens to support the load, and the myofibroblasts literally lay down new, dense collagen fibers to reinforce the hunched shape. The fascia acts like wet clay that slowly hardens and crystallizes into whatever shape you leave it in.
That is horrifying. I am literally casting my own body into a permanent mold of terrible posture.
It undergoes plastic deformation.
Yeah.
It is no longer an elastic rubber band. It has physically changed its cellular structure.
This is why, after years of sitting, simply trying to stand up straight feels exhausting. You are no longer just fighting gravity. You are engaging in a physical battle against your own hardened anatomy. The tissue has immobilized you.
Exactly.
So if my fascia has laid down dense collagen to freeze me into a state of synergistic dominance, how on earth do I fix it? I can't just forcefully yank on the tissue.
No, if you try to stretch a hardened fascial web too quickly, you'll just tear a muscle.
You will tear it because the nervous system will fight you. To safely change the length of these tissues, you can't just use brute force. You have to hack the nervous system.
You have to understand the microscopic sensors that govern flexibility and use their own reflexes against them.
The science of stretching. This isn't just mindlessly touching your toes in gym class. This is highly strategic and neurological manipulation.
It really is.
Let's meet the two sensors that are constantly at war inside our muscles. The muscle spindles and the Golgi tendon organs, or GTOs.
These two receptors dictate exactly how far you can stretch. Let's start with the defense mechanism. The muscle spindles.
Okay, what do they do?
These are sensory receptors that lie parallel to the actual muscle fibers. Their entire job is to monitor the length of the muscle and, crucially, the rate of change in that length.
They are the body's velocity sensors.
Exactly. If a muscle is stretched too quickly or stretched beyond its normal resting length, the muscle spindles panic. They interpret this rapid lengthening as an impending catastrophic tear.
So what's their reaction?
They immediately fire a high-speed sensory impulse straight to the spinal cord. The spinal cord doesn't even bother consulting the brain. It instantly fires a motor signal back, commanding the muscle to violently contract and resist the stretch.
It's the stretch reflex. It's like the seatbelt in your car. If you lean forward slowly, the seatbelt lets you move. But if you slam on the brakes and your body violently throws forward, the seatbelt instantly locks up to save your life.
A perfect analogy.
Yeah.
But when we are intentionally trying to stretch a chronically tight, facilitated muscle like our desk workers' hip flexors, the muscle spindles are our enemy.
Because they are hypersensitive, their seatbelts are locked, and they're actively fighting the stretch, keeping the tissue short.
Exactly.
So how do we bypass a locked seatbelt? If the spindle is the locking mechanism, what is the emergency release valve?
The release valve is the Golgi tendon organ. GTOs are located at the musculotendinous junction, the exact point where the muscle fibers merged into the tendon, which then attaches to the bone.
And unlike the spindles, which measure length, GTOs measure tension.
They are the strain gauges.
Right. They are an evolutionary failsafe. If the tension inside a tendon reaches a dangerously high level, the GTO senses that the muscle is about to physically rip the tendon right off the bone.
To prevent this, the GTO sends a powerful inhibitory signal to the spinal cord that completely overrides the panic of the muscle spindle. It forces the muscle to instantly relax.
It shuts off the power grid to save the hardware. The technical term for this is autogenic inhibition.
Yes. And in clinical flexibility training, we can intentionally manipulate the GTOs to force our tightest muscles to let go. There are several methods. The most common is static stretching.
Where you just reach for your toes and hold it. But based on the physics we just discussed, a 5-second hold isn't going to do anything, right?
A 5-second hold just agitates the muscle spindles. To achieve autogenic inhibition through static stretching, you have to slowly take the muscle to the point of mild tension, bypassing the velocity trigger of the spindle, and then you must hold it there for at least 15 to 30 seconds.
You have to outweight the nervous system.
You hold the tension long enough that the GTOs finally acclimate to the stress and send the signal to quiet the muscle spindles down, allowing the viscous properties of the tissue to finally yield.
But if you want to aggressively hack the system, you use PNF, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation.
This is the biological cheat code.
How does PNF actively trick the GTOs?
PNF is brilliant.
Yeah.
It uses active muscular contraction to manufacture the tension needed to trigger the GTOs. Here's how the most common technique, the hold-relax method, works.
Let's run through a scenario.
Let's say you are a trainer trying to stretch my terribly tight hamstrings. I lie on my back and you lift my leg up until I feel a stretch. We are at the barrier of my flexibility.
The muscle spindles are starting to lock the seatbelt.
Exactly. Now, instead of you just pushing harder and tearing my muscle, you tell me to push my leg back down against your shoulder. I perform a submaximal isometric contraction for about 6 seconds.
Okay, let's define that. Isometric means you are firing the muscle, you are pushing hard, but the joint isn't actually moving. You're pushing against an immovable object, in this case, the trainer.
Right. By actively contracting my hamstring in that stretched position, I am building massive tension directly in the hamstring tendon.
And the GTOs are sitting in the tendon monitoring tension, so they start screaming, too much tension, we are going to rip off the bone.
Exactly. After 6 seconds of pushing, you tell me to relax. I stop pushing. But the GTOs are still firing their inhibitory signals at maximum volume. They have completely shut down the muscle spindles. The seatbelt is turned off.
The emergency release valve has been pulled.
And in that brief 10-second window of profound neurological relaxation, you can passively push my legs significantly further back than you could a minute ago. The muscle yields almost magically.
That is incredible. And there's a second neurological loophole PNF exploits called reciprocal inhibition. This one sounds like a Jedi mind trick. How does the CRIC method work? Contract relax, antagonist contract.
Reciprocal inhibition is a hardwired rule of movement. It states that when your brain sends a signal to contract a prime mover, it must simultaneously send a signal to relax the opposing muscle, the antagonist.
If it didn't, the two muscles would fight each other, and you couldn't move your joints.
Right. If I flex my bicep to bend my elbow, my tricep on the back of my arm has to shut off and lengthen, otherwise my arm stays straight.
Exactly. So, returning to my tight hamstrings, we do the 6-second isometric push to trigger the GTOs. I relax. But then as you push my leg further into the stretch, I actively flex my quadriceps, the muscle on the front of my thigh, the antagonist to the hamstring.
Because you are consciously flexing the quad, the brain is neurologically forced to send a relaxation signal to the hamstring to get it out of the way.
You are attacking the tight hamstring from two neurological angles simultaneously. The GTOs are inhibiting it from within, and the flexing quadriceps are inhibiting it from across the joint. It is a highly precise dialogue with your own spinal cord.
It's remarkably effective.
So we have the complete toolkit. We understand how the brain wants to move in complex kinetic chains. We know how gravity and sitting cause our slow-twitch postural muscles to become tight micromanagers and our fast-twitch phasic muscles to fall asleep.
We know this causes synergistic dominance, grinding our joints into the pain cycle.
And we know how to use viscoelasticity and PNF to unlock the hardened fascial web. The theory is brilliant. Now, how do we actually apply this blueprint to a broken human body?
We apply the 6-step muscle balance prescription model. This is the clinical framework for reversing the dysfunction. And the research provides 2 incredibly detailed case studies that show exactly how this plays out in real life.
Let's look at case study 1, Rose. I want us to really visualize the mechanical physics acting on Rose's life. Rose is a 37-year-old bank teller.
She has 2 young kids, a 3-year-old and an 18-month-old. She's incredibly busy and doesn't exercise regularly.
And her primary complaint: chronic, debilitating neck tension and headaches. She wants a home routine to get rid of the pain.
If Rose walks into a standard clinic, the symptom is a headache. They give her ibuprofen, maybe a neck massage, and tell her to reduce her stress. But the underlying mechanics haven't changed.
Our model demands a postural assessment first. We have to look at the seesaw. And when we look at Rose, we find a textbook case of upper cross syndrome.
Okay, let's paint the visual picture of upper cross syndrome. What does Rose look like when she stands sideways in front of a mirror?
Start at the head. You will see a pronounced forward head posture. Instead of her ear lining up vertically with her shoulder, her chin is jutting out, pulling her heavy skull several inches forward of her center of gravity.
Like a bowling ball hanging off the front of a stick.
Exactly. Moving down, you will see rounded shoulders. The shoulders are slumped forward, and her arms are internally rotated, meaning the backs of her hands are facing forward instead of resting flat against her sides.
Her chest is physically depressed, caved in. And to compensate for the bowling ball of her head falling forward, her cervical spine, her neck, has an exaggerated, hyperextended curve just to keep her eyes level with the horizon.
The seesaw is completely destroyed. So let's diagnose the tug of war. Who are the tight, hyperexcitable micromanagers pulling Rose out of alignment? What is her daily life doing to her tissues?
Think about her day. She is a bank teller, so she is reaching forward over a counter, handling cash and typing for 8 hours.
And she is a mother of an 18-month-old.
Right, so she spends hours a day physically holding a baby to her chest, feeding and carrying. Her arms are constantly in front of her.
Because of the sustained mechanical load, the massive muscles on the front of her chest, the pectoralis major and minor, have experienced creep and fascial hardening.
They are severely tight, pulling her shoulders violently forward and inward.
And what about the neck tension causing the headaches?
Remember, for every inch the head moves forward off its center of gravity, the relative weight of the head placed on the neck muscles effectively doubles. Her upper trapezius, levator scapulae, and cervical extensors are screaming.
They are locked in a state of permanent isometric spasm, fighting a desperate, losing battle to keep her head from snapping off her neck.
The micromanagers are exhausted. So who has fallen asleep? Who are the weak, inhibited phasic muscles that are failing to pull the bowling ball back?
The muscles on the front of her neck, the deep cervical flexors, are weak and overstretched. And crucially, the muscles of her mid and lower back, the rhomboids, the middle trapezius, and the lower trapezius.
Their job is to pull the shoulder blades together and down, opening the chest. But they are overstretched across her rounded back, neurally inhibited by the screaming pectoralis muscles, and completely dormant.
This is where standard fitness advice is so dangerous. If Rose decides she wants to get fit and starts doing standard gym workouts, let's say she starts doing push-ups and overhead presses, what happens?
It would be a biomechanical disaster. Push-ups would strengthen her pectoralis muscles, but her pecs are already neurologically facilitated and incredibly tight.
Doing a push-up just adds raw horsepower to the exact muscles that are pulling her skeletal structure out of alignment. Her upper cross syndrome would get worse, the internal rotation would increase, and her headaches would multiply.
You cannot just add strength to dysfunction. You just create a stronger dysfunction. So the 6-step model says we must first stretch the tight and only then strengthen the weak.
What is Rose's flexibility prescription?
We have to unlock the front and top. For the chest, they prescribed a doorway pec stretch.
Walk me through the physics of a doorway stretch. Why does that work?
She stands in a doorway, places her forearms on the doorframe, and slowly steps her body weight forward. By anchoring the arms and moving the torso, gravity and her own mass provide a sustained, passive force that mechanically separates and lengthens the shortened pectoralis fibers.
We are forcing the fascial tissue to yield.
Right. They also prescribe gentle, sustained lateral neck stretches and active chin tucks to release the locking tension in her neck extensors.
Okay, so we've pulled the emergency release valve on the pecs and the upper traps. The seesaw is unlocked. Now we have to wake up the sleepy workers on the back. What is the strengthening prescription?
We have to isolate the rhomboids and lower traps without letting the overactive upper traps take over. They prescribed supine scapular retractions.
Supine, meaning lying flat on her back. Why does she have to lie down? Why can't she just do it standing?
Because if she stands up, gravity forces her upper traps to activate just to hold her shoulders up, and her micromanagers will immediately take over the movement.
That makes sense.
By lying flat on the floor, gravity is neutralized. The upper traps can finally relax. In that neutralized state, she simply pinches her shoulder blades together against the floor. This forces the dormant rhomboids to fire, waking up the neurological pathway.
It's all about giving the weak side of the joint enough raw strength to hold its ground in the tug of war.
Exactly. And they also added resisted diagonal shoulder extensions using a rubber tube to build functional multiplane strength in the posterior chain.
After 5 weeks of stretching the front and strengthening the back, Rose's structural balance improved. The chest opened up, the head migrated back over the shoulders, the excessive strain on the neck muscles vanished, and as a direct result, her tension headaches disappeared.
By fixing the structural geometry of the skeleton, the symptom evaporated. That is incredibly satisfying.
It really is. Now let's move down the kinetic chain to the hips. Case study 2, Kevin.
Kevin is a very different archetype. He is a 45-year-old divorced stockbroker. He works incredibly long hours sitting at a desk analyzing screens. However, unlike Rose, he is somewhat active. He plays old-timers hockey once a week.
He is a classic weekend warrior.
Right. And his primary symptom is chronic, moderate, lower back discomfort. He wants to lose some fat and fix his back.
Again, if we just look at the back pain, we miss the diagnosis. A postural assessment of Kevin reveals the complete opposite of Rose's upper body issue. Kevin is suffering from a textbook case of lower cross syndrome.
Map this out for us visually. I'm looking at Kevin from the side. What is happening to his pelvis?
The pelvis is the foundational keystone of the human body. In a healthy posture, it sits relatively level. But in Kevin, you would see a massive anterior pelvic tilt.
Imagine the pelvis is a large bowl filled to the brim with water. In an anterior tilt, the bowl is tipped severely forward and the water is spilling out down the front of his thighs.
That is a perfect visualization. And the lumbar spine, the lower back, is firmly attached to the back of that pelvic bowl. When the pelvis tips forward, it physically drags the lower spine forward with it, creating a deep, exaggerated, hyperextended curve in his lower back.
It's an excessive lumbar lordosis.
So the geometry of his core is completely compromised. Diagnosing Kevin's tug of war, who are the hyperexcitable micromanagers pulling that bowl forward.
It's the desk worker's curse. The primary culprits are his deep hip flexors, the iliopsoas, and the rectus femoris, which is a quad muscle that crosses the hip.
Kevin sits in a chair for 10 hours a day. His hips are held in constant 90-degree flexion.
The myofibroblasts in his fascia have laid down thick, dense collagen, locking those hip flexors into a state of permanent shrinkage. They are incredibly strong, incredibly tight, and they are ruthlessly pulling the front of his pelvis down toward his knees.
And because his lower back is bent into an extreme arch to compensate, his lower back muscles, the erector spinae, are also trapped in a tight, shortened state of constant spasm.
Right, so you have a diagonal line of extreme tightness running from the front of his hips up to his lower back. That is one half of the cross.
So who are the weak, inhibited muscles making up the other half of the cross? Who has fallen asleep and allowed the bowl to spill?
The opposing muscles. His abdominal muscles in the front are overstretched across his protruding stomach and neurally inhibited. They lack the strength to pull the front rim of the pelvis upward.
And on the back, his gluteus maximus and his hamstrings are compressed by sitting, neurologically dormant, and completely unable to pull the back rim of the pelvis down.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, Kevin's tight hip flexors are physically and neurologically dominating his skeletal structure. His weak glutes and abs are utterly failing to fight back.
Putting an ice pack on his sore lower back is entirely useless because it does not change the rotational angle of his pelvis.
Exactly. And his weekend warrior habits are actually throwing gasoline on the fire.
The hockey, why is hockey making it worse?
Think about the biomechanics of ice skating. You are bent over, holding a stick, in a state of constant hip flexion. The explosive skating stride heavily relies on the quadriceps and hip flexors.
So he sits all week shortening his hip flexors, and then on the weekend he goes to the rink and aggressively loads and trains those exact same tightened muscles, driving the pelvis even further into an anterior tilt.
It's a disaster.
Yeah.
So how does this six-step model rebuild Kevin's pelvis?
Stretch the tight, strengthen the weak. The priority is to unlock the micromanagers. They prescribed a supine knees-to-chest stretch to gently elongate the spasming tissues in his lower back. But the absolute key for Kevin is the one-joint hip flexor lunge stretch.
Explain the physics of that lunge. Why is it so vital?
He kneels on one knee, keeping his torso perfectly upright, and gently pushes his hips forward. By anchoring the knee on the ground and pushing the pelvis forward, he is maximizing the distance between the origin and insertion of the iliopsoas.
He is forcing those hardened fascial tissues and hyperactive muscle spindles to elongate and yield, releasing their death grip on the front of his pelvis.
He's basically cutting the rope that's pulling the bull forward. Now, the strengthening phase. We have to wake up the abs and the glutes.
To strengthen the front of the core, they prescribed abdominal crunches and curl-ups. This shortens and strengthens the rectus abdominis, giving it the horsepower to pull the front rim of the pelvis back up. To wake up the posterior chain, they prescribed supine hip thrusts.
Lying on his back, knees bent, pushing his hips up into the air.
Right, and by doing this with his hip flexors previously stretched, the gluteus maximus can finally fire without being neurally inhibited. He is retraining the CEO prime mover to do its job.
The result is purely mechanical engineering applied to biology. By loosening the tension on the hip flexors and increasing the pulling force of the glutes and abs, the pelvic bowl naturally rotates backward into a neutral, level position.
The deep arch in his lower back flattens out, the joints decompress, and the back pain disappears.
It is a functional re-education of the nervous system. You aren't just building bigger muscles, you are reprogramming the software that governs how the brain aligns the skeleton against gravity.
This has been an incredibly eye-opening journey. I feel like I have an entirely new lens through which to view my own body. We started by tearing down the simplistic myth of fitness as just isolating single muscles on rigid, single-plane gym machines.
We realize that our brains don't recognize isolated muscles. They recognize complex, multiplanar kinetic chains that manage gravity through loading and unloading.
We discovered the constant internal tug-of-war happening across our joints between our hard-working, slow-twitch postural stabilizers and our fast-fatiguing phasic mobilizers.
And we exposed how our modern lifestyle of sitting heavily favors the exact muscles already genetically prone to tightening up, turning them into toxic micromanagers.
We traced the disastrous physics of synergistic dominance, where helper muscles are forced to become prime movers, leading to altered mechanics, joint stress, and the chronic pain cycle, proving that a twisting pain in the knee can easily originate from a locked-up calf muscle.
We dove into the strange viscoelastic world of our connective tissue. We learned about creep, and how our active fascial web literally lays down dense collagen to physically trap us in bad posture.
And we learned how to use the biological cheat codes of PNF, stretching, hacking the Golgi tendon organs to bypass our own spinal reflexes and unlock our tissues.
And finally, through Rose and Kevin, we saw how targeted postural assessments and the prescription of stretching the tight and strengthening the weak can literally reshape the geometry of a broken human body, pulling it out of chronic pain.
It completely redefines what it means to be fit. It's not about how much weight you can put on a barbell or how you look in a mirror. It's about the structural harmony of the machine.
So if you're listening to this, I want to challenge you right now, wherever you are, take a quick internal scan of your own posture. As you sit, walk, or stand, notice which muscles feel like they're locked on tight and holding tension.
Which muscles feel completely dormant and asleep. Look at the seesaws of your own joints. Where might you be slowly entering that joint stress cycle?
And as you reflect on that, I want you to consider a lingering, profound implication of the biology we discussed today regarding fascia. We learned that your fascial web is alive.
It contains myofibroblasts that actively remodel your anatomy based on the sustained mechanical loads you expose it to. It responds to tension by permanently laying down dense, crystallized tissue.
This raises a fascinating and slightly terrifying question for you to explore on your own. If our physical tissues plastically adapt to our daily positions, and even to the chronic, unconscious tension of our stressful lives, what physical memory is your daily routine slowly weaving into your connective tissue right now?